Hey folks, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. You know, this nerd.
Nerdarchy 10.
And today we're going to do a little love letter to Nerdarchy's favorite Dungeons and Dragons monsters.
Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with us.
Alright, so we want to talk about a little bit of world building, and it's kind of like a little bit of like our love letter to Dungeons and Dragons and the history of Dungeons and Dragons. For 5th edition, but not specifically from 5th edition. So, as some of you guys know, we've been creating our own stuff, our own worlds, and we're actually starting to create products, right? So, one of the obstacles with that is there's like this rich lore of D&D stuff that we really do love because we've been playing with it for decades. It's been, it's been part of our lives for a long time. But, there's legal issues, so we can't just use it in our materials. But we'd still like to, give a nod to it and acknowledge it, and maybe do our own reimaginings, our own re-envisioning of things. In this case, we want to look at two really iconic Dungeons and Dragons monsters that have meant a lot to us, and that is the Beholder
and the Illithid.
The
Mindflayer.
Yeah. So, these guys are so iconic. They've both made their ways into other forms of media, giving nod. I mean, the Beholders even appeared on Futurama. So, these are kind of a big deal. So, for the Beholder, we're going to create dread spheres. We don't have a name for
our illithids yet.
Conceptually, and we also want to make these different than what already exists. We don't want to just like recreate.
We're not going to take a Beholder, slap a new name on it,
make
and
it
say,
square.
This is what we've got. We want to make something
unique.
Unique. We want to have its own history and say, well, how do we go ahead and make this our own?
Right, but at the same time, we want to give a nod to the things that we really do love.
So you brought this concept to me literally today. On the drive over here, you're like, I got this idea, and I want to work with it. In our world, we don't have the Underdark, we have the Beneath. So we keep trying to change things to really make our world enough of our world.
Unique, its own thing, and really, we want to try and get away from being just another generic fantasy setting. So, to that end, we do have we love the idea of a plane of madness, a realm of chaos, our version of the far realm. Conceptually, it's just a really cool place. So, this realm of madness, we definitely want to have, at some point, there's going to be some kind of invasion. Our world is rife with different ages that have happened. So, we want to create these demon lord-like beings, or, even like higher power solar angel-like beings, but they've been spawned from this other world. Eberron did something similar with the Dark so, I'm definitely going to take some inspiration from there, because those guys are freaking badass and really cool. and I like the idea, the way Eberron kind of is like, okay, well, anything that's an aberration and is really freaking weird probably came from this plane of madness in Eberron and Zuria. For us, we'll just have our own chaos realm. And I like the idea of these uber powerful beings coming, and just by their nature, things being around them tend to get warped and changed. And that's just by them existing. Now, if they actually bend themselves to doing it, that's a whole nother matter. And it's actually like an art form and something they like to do.
So with the ability to literally reshape, physically, magically, what things are able to do, what they look like. We had two of these unique individual creatures, these cosmic beings, kind of set forth a challenge to each other of who can come up with the best design for a powerful being to inhabit and possibly take over or gain control in this prime material plane.
And also, they see this. They will see the weird and the strange, and the horrific, grotesque. That is beauty to them, right?
Right.
In their madness, like they're like Bizarro kind of.
So one of these creatures decided that he liked the lithe and beautiful elves and he wanted to shape them in such a way to, accentuate this point to a little bit of horrific level. So elves are normally already lithe and thin. Well, if you emaciate them further by stretching them taller, and maybe like, 10 feet tall, make them hairless, and again, accentuate those points that are different. Maybe they've got, further, slanted eyes, the really long pointed ears, like grotesquely so, like you see in some of those anime shows, maybe even longer. Their necks could be extended a little bit to kind of give you some of that weird feeling.
I'm also feeling like extra joints in their fingers, extra articulation.
Yeah, that could totally work with these. I mean, heck, even an extra joint in their arms, to be like, oh well, I'm gonna do this weird thing, might not be out of the realm of absurdity.
Well, the other thing too is I really like the idea of when I envision these guys, it's like now you take a elf and a gray, mash them together, and then you kind of like pull them like taffy, right? And I like the idea that, like you said, the extra big eyes that are just completely black like a shark's, and they're a little extra slanted, the longer ears, and everything is really super thin, emaciated, and elongated. And so, except for they do have this one feature, and it's like a defining feature for all of them, and it kind of like shows through that dead pallor colored flesh that they have, and it's almost like a jester's motley, or star shaped, and it kind of moves and writhes beneath the flesh,
beneath the skin. So like even if they're wearing garments, like you'll see the bulge, and every once in a while you'll see it, bend and twist. Their neck, while is lengthened, does seem to belie that there's possibly something underneath their flesh, as even the neck kind of writhes in tandem with these things underneath their upper chest and upper back. And
I also see like this is the only area where they might have a different coloration,
mm-hmm.
and the color might even change, almost like the camouflage ability of an octopus or starfish or some other critters, and they might even communicate that way a little bit as well. And it's an identifier, so they know they can tell each other apart.
So if you haven't been able to follow along, this is our nod to the illithid. And those things underneath their flesh, these are their tendrils that an illithid would typically have. And when they so desire, they can kind of, vomit these tendrils up, and it comes out, and their mouth impossibly widens to fill with all of these things. And as opposed to going through the messy process of cutting into a brain and, sucking that out. These creatures, they actually feed on and devour an entire psyche of an individual.
Right. Maybe it could be the psyche, it could be emotions. Maybe they have different tastes individually. So they like to stimulate different emotions before they feed. And literally those tentacles, when they come out, just in my mind, it's like as if you lopped off the bottom half of an octopus or squid. And that's literally what comes out of their mouth, with, at the center of it being like this, maybe like this lamprey type orifice. And like the tentacles don't insert, they just kind of wrap around the head, and they sucker that thing right on you, like an algae eater or a suckerfish. And then they just feed.
So you don't have like the beak that is of a mindflayer or a grick, because they don't have to bite through the bone. They just want to get purchase.
And also, I was like, had this idea. This is a little bit too in depth, but they don't have like biological functions the way most creatures do. So anatomically, they would resemble like a Ken doll. There's nothing going on anywheres. They don't produce waste, and they don't reproduce the way other species do. Like I had this idea that several of them have to come together upon a prey, a person, and feed at the same time, or maybe it's not even feeding. Maybe this is like the impregnation thing, and they do like the alien thing. If when 3 or 4 of them come together on the same head, four might be too much. Maybe only 2 or 3 can fit. But they do this, and they kind of like do this ritual or whatever you want to call it. And what's going to be left is this person is eventually going to turn into one of them.
So I kind of like this idea. It completely changes the lore around this creature. You get something that in the end is similar, but vastly different in name, in appearance, in abilities. And you can take it and take this creature and go in a vast difference. Like, oh well, do they still find solace in the Underdark because that's where they prefer, or does that environment not make a difference to them? So you begin to reshape the world as you re-envision this creature that is so iconic to D&D, and you make something new and wondrous and beautiful.
Now the other participants in this competition, besides dwarves, is the go-to. Like, they're so hardy, they're industrious, they have a lot of good traits. And so what he does is he takes these dwarves and just begins inflating their heads until they rip away from their body, leaving that uselessness behind. And so much so the head kind of becomes this giant, almost sphere-like object, where through the process the eyes kind of like merge, not like the central eye of a beholder. It's similar, but instead it's going to keep the double pupils, but it's still going to be like one eye, one orb. We're not going to do tentacles and eye stalks. We're going to do beardicles. So it's going to be this shaggy, floating, bloated sphere.
So it's going to be shaggy and furry. So it's going to have these tendrils of hair that it has the ability to control. Yes, you could still say, oh well, some of them have the ability to produce magical effects should you want to go to that iteration of a beholder. But now you've taken this sphere and it's got the power to use its beard, its fur, its hair as appendages however it wants. Well, now it can manipulate tools. Now it doesn't need to have the same powers of a beholder to really function and live the way a beholder does. Beholders use telekinesis and disintegration to manipulate tools, to blast out its caverns. Well, now this industrious dread sphere, because Dave came up with a good name for this one. It can still take that dwarven heritage and smith and craft and mine and pervert it, but to smith and craft and mine things that it so desires, but just using the sheer power of its hair.
Yeah, and we'll probably I'm envisioning things like getting like it's not going to have ears. It is going to be like just a giant bloated head with a big mouthful of blocky teeth that are like rocks, and like you said, the beards are kind of like tendrils and tentacles. I'm really curious to see what we can do with the eye, because I like the idea of like the double pupils, but like really close together where they're almost touching but not quite. And of course, this thing is going to need magical abilities because we want it to be like that kind of threat. Maybe maybe go in a little bit of a different direction. Maybe we're going to do some weird, crazy things with its tongue, as opposed to having eye rays and stuff like that. And this, like, we are in the very preliminary stages of these ideas, and we have the germ, and now we're going to expand out from there and see what we can come up with.
We're going to plant this seed and see what happens.
So it may end up in a future product for Nerdarchy. Who knows? Speaking of products, if you go over to the website, you can find Nerdarchy the store, and in that store you can find these awesome elementals or crystal golems if you prefer, or ice golems, whatever you want to use them for, depending on what color you get. But they're a fantastic addition to any tabletop role-playing game. Go check them out at the Nerdarchy store. So, guys, what do you think of this idea? Later on, we're going to delve into these otherworldly lords You're gonna start coming up with probably a whole hierarchy, court. What did that invasion look like? What other kinds of crazy monsters did they come up with? Are there other really cool D&D iconic monsters that we really can't use in our world, but we can again kind of like give our nod to it and how much they've influenced us, and maybe we'll pervert another race like gnomes or halflings and come up with something crazy. Maybe some suggestions. We got a place for that down in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You can hang out with us over on Facebook.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.